Okay. Oh,
Right.
all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Um, our presenter for the very first Zoom presentation of 2024 is Mr. Dru Holley. He is a passionate African American filmmaker and founder who is on a mission to shine a light on the untold stories of marginalized individuals throughout history. In response to the lack of diversity and representation in the industry, Holly brought together talented and creative teams to establish Black Bald Films LLC in 2018. Through this groundbreaking platform, Holly is able to amplify the voices of those who have been excluded or overlooked and share their diverse experiences with the world. So, Dru, I just want to say thank you so much for
Wendy,
being here
thank you
this
for having
evening, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. So, the floor is yours.
Wendy, well, thank you for having me. I don't really have a presentation. I have a real cash conversation with and the Q&A back and forth talk back. So I guess I can start out with how I came upon this project. Back in 2017, excuse me, it was 2018. It was Juneteenth 2018. Langston Hughes Foundation was having a Juneteenth celebration. Um, I had helped them with their film festival. I was kind of getting back into the film and art scene. And I brought my daughter with me to check out the festival while I captured footage to kind of promote that next year's event. Um, while I was there, my little girl, who was 6 at the time, she checked out the festival. And after a while, I heard her say, "Ooh, horsies." And when I looked up from the camera, I seen this group of all black cowboy regiments, like straight out of the 1800s, galloping up the hill on horseback. Um, I was a bit like taken back. And then my daughter asked me, "Who are they, Daddy?" And I was stumped. And I was like, "Man, who are these guys?" And then I don't know, something dawned on me. It might have been, Bob Marley's song, Buffalo Soldiers, that finally clicked into my head, or maybe it was the Danny Glover movie I had seen, or maybe I had seen some reenactors a long time ago, but something in the back of my like self-conscious, realized. I said, "I think these are Buffalo Soldiers." And her next question is, "What's a Buffalo Soldier?" Me having no other answers to give her, right? Kind of went and looked up some information, and I didn't know what to tell her, realizing there wasn't a lot of material there for my 6-year-old daughter, or my 16-year-old daughter. I I set about making this project. The project definitely grew organically. What I was used to was going to make like a short promotional type of thing for their organization specifically. And um, taking the bull by the horns, for the lack of a better metaphor, that I decided, I need to step up and make a documentary about these Black patriots. So yeah, that's how I became upon the film. If you have more questions, Wendy, we could bat them back and forth. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. So, after watching the documentary, I think what jumped out to me was when the Texas Ranger, I'm sorry, not Texas Ranger, Park Ranger, actually mentioned the title that the
Mhm.
Buffalo Soldiers were fighting on two fronts. And yeah, if you could just speak about where that title came from. I think,
Mhm.
it's a great title because it says a lot, in a very succinct way.
Yeah, no, so the title came from Ranger Shelton when he said that, right? Before, our title was Buffalo Soldiers of the Pacific Northwest, because I had just moved out here and I was finding all this history, and it was really, and it was a local story, which allowed me to bring in local people to support it. Um, as the story evolved over a few fellowships and and a few different editors. And as a story should evolve, it's hard to try to do a story within a year, which I thought that I could do. Um, as I learned more, we realized that we could not, do the story here. We had to tell a more broader story before we could ever talk about here. So the film started out as Buffalo Soldiers of the Pacific Northwest. During, the 2 years of editing, we realized that the story isn't of the Pacific Northwest. Um, so uh, and just figure, like we were having a lot of people suggesting us, Buffalo Soldiers fighting for survival, which is the Bob Marley song, which I hated. But we had a lot of different opinions on the title, but we ultimately came up with what Ranger Shelton said on Fighting on Two Fronts because it just fit perfectly with the film.
And everyone else is welcome to ask questions as well. If you don't want to say it out loud, you can always utilize the chat. My other question is, what surprised you most while you were creating the documentary? Were there any stories that surprised you or anything that you felt that just, if you had not done this documentary, you would not be where you are now because of the profound um, surprise or information that you learned?
No, this film, Buffalo Soldiers, takes a hard look at historical complexities like race, class, power, and colonism and Western expansion as a part of United States history. Not fully knowing, like how the Buffalo Soldiers got their name, what wars they was involved with, was something at first that had took me back, that was kind of, shocking, I guess, right? And I guess that was lack of my full exposure to history. But I guess the learning them about them with the Indian Wars was something that had taken
Mhm.
back. That was, I guess, shocking to learn, but realizing how complex history is, right? And learning, on a more intimate level why these men would have joined the military and what benefit did it serve their family and how times was different back then. Um, I guess that was something that took me by surprise.
Yeah, I think what I appreciated was the story of Charles Young.
Hmm.
His story is completely unique in that he was one of the first Black men to attend West Point, right?
Hmm.
And he had an
Third,
exemplary third to
yeah.
attend West Point. He had exemplary service. Um, but we go through his life as a soldier and we learned that all he wanted to do was fight for America, but seemed like he always was up against a roadblock. Um, his life, I don't want to say it was tragic in the end, but he was sort of sent off to Liberia to die, which is so sad. Um, would you say that his story is atypical, or how do you feel about the trajectory of his story?
Yeah, no, his story, from what and from our research is, very much typical, except for Charles Young was an exemplary a person, right? From his years of serving as an officer and all the things he did outside of his service. He was one of our, African American heroes that doesn't get enough notoriety for what he did and what he meant for us. We picked three three people to kind of take us through this story. Moses Williams, the reason why
Mhm.
he was picked is because Moses Williams' service maybe even started in the Civil War. We're finding out more research now that he could have served in the Civil War, right? So his story takes us through that first part of the Buffalo Soldier story, right? And it connects us to the Civil War, it connects us to the South, it connects us to the West, right? And Charles Young's story connects us past that, excuse me, into that, you know, 19th century, right? And as
Mhm.
America tried to establish colonies and territories across seas, right, whose story didn't necessarily fit in that mold, but that we felt was very important was Kathy Williams' story, right? And
Yeah.
right, of who she was and what she uh, meant to us, opposed to even what she meant to them back then. So her story was important that needed to be told. And yeah, we were happy that, there's not any, you know, real archive images of Kathy Williams. So
Mhm.
we're happy to be able to, um, use a Black woman illustrator to depict what she thinks Kathy Williams would look like.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to learn about Kathy Williams because we know that she was the only woman, correct, to ever serve. And just the way that she entered the into service is so interesting that she changed her name and pretended to be a man. Um, Another interesting thing that I thought was and I think it just sort of encapsulated everything was the picture that was used of Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, and how the narrator said that, most of the time we just see the image of Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, but if you pan out, you see that he's flanked by Buffalo soldiers. And, that image right there sort of tells a story of how selfless these men were and how they didn't get credit, yet they were always right there when needed, you
I
know?
think more than it just tells that story, but it also tells the story what we're doing our best, and that our parents maybe not had the opportunity to do is tell a wider story, right?
Mhm.
Right, that right, we only seen this, great white hope imagery, right? When not knowing that all the people, right, that were a part of this that isn't getting there necessarily their shine.
Exactly. Exactly. Does anyone have any questions?
Don't be shy now. I came all the way from Portland, Oregon to Texas to have this conversation with you.
And I think everybody's on mute, it looks like. So thank you for muting yourself. So y'all can just unmute and ask a question, or you can text in the chat. Hey, Miss Golden, how are you?
Hello. Good evening, Wendy.
Good to see your face.
Thank you. My question to Dru Holley is, were the Buffalo Soldiers, were they slaves? Were they forced to fight? And which side did they fight on?
So the Buffalo Soldiers were veterans, if you want to get technical about it, were veterans of the Indian Wars, right? They got their names from the Native American people, which and that was around, I don't know, 1870s, I'm gonna say, right? So the Civil War ended about 1866. Um, some may have been slaves. I mean, maybe a majority of them may have been former enslaved people. Um, what was the other question, ma'am?
Were they slaves? And did the tribes own those? Or did they just, did they get in with any Indian tribes? Like, for instance, I'm going to say Billy Bowlegs was Seminole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I don't, I think, and it's hard to group and put everybody into into a box. I'm sure some, did, run off with certain Native American tribes. Um, for instance, Cherokee Bill's father, who was a Buffalo soldier, his mother was a Cherokee woman, right? And he was an offspring of them. Um, so yeah, no, I'm sure uh, there was Buffalo soldiers that ran off with Seminole people or Native American people. There was another question you asked too, but I forget what it was. I wanted to answer it. You remember what it was?
I know. Were they forced to fight?
No, I don't think they was forced to fight. It was an opportunity, right? It was an opportunity to not be sharecroppers or not to, right, to make
Agree.
$13 a month for their service more than they have ever thought was ever possible, and at least their fathers and their fathers' fathers. So no, I don't think they was forced to fight. They were enrolled in just like in today's, enlisting in the army for an opportunity. Unless, and again, I wouldn't want to say overarching, I would say overarching that this was the case, but who knows, individually, there might have been different cases. And they fought for the Union, yes.
Oh,
And,
good. Okay,
and
I was just going to ask that.
And this was actually when this was after the Civil War. So, right, this was as America was trying to, after the Civil War, and trying to expand into Native American territory in the West.
A question that I have is, most of the people who do the reenactments, are they related to a Buffalo Soldier, or do you know if anybody can join who has an interest?
No, I would imagine anyone can join who has an interest. I think an issue with our community is learning what our like lineage is,
Yeah.
right? If we have Buffalo Soldiers in our as ancestors, if we have Seminole Negro Indians as our ancestors, right?
Mhm.
I think these films are to kind of get you to take a look and see what your ancestry is.
Yeah, has everybody had a chance to watch the film? I'll put a link in the chat to the Amazon Prime. Well, it's available on Amazon Prime, and I think you can also buy it on DVD. Is there somewhere else that they can watch it, Drew?
Yes, on PBS as well.
And PBS.
There, yeah. I also have a link. Let me see if I can pull up a link real quick.
Yeah, you might be faster than me. Able to. I think you're on mute, Dr. Al. Still on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Muted because my sinuses are killing me, and I get
Ah,
if I start. There was a journal published in those days called the Army Navy Gazette, which is now Armed Forces Journal. And occasionally there are articles and letters about the Buffalo Soldiers.
Mm.
Like the famous bicycle, the bicycle march. There's actually the whole report published in there. And there was a private named Prather, Prather, who wrote a couple of interesting poems about the service. He was in the 1890s. I haven't been able to find anything else about him, which is not unusual actually for anybody in that period, white or black, because there wasn't a whole lot of paperwork in those days. So you might turn up and be noticed for a while and have lots of paperwork just for a short time, and then you leave that job or something. But he did at least two poems that I'm aware of, and he might have done more because I haven't gone through the whole set. And he talks about being assigned unpleasant in the poems, some unpleasant duty. Because part of the problem is everybody in the Army complains. Nothing is ever right if you're soldiering. So it's sometimes hard to tell whether he's complaining about something that's particularly a problem for the Buffalo Soldiers, or it's just something that's Army stuff, But it's interesting to see how he expresses himself. He's quite a good writer. I looked for more material from him, but I couldn't find much. Not just two poems.
So the Iron Riders is what they were called. That was their nickname for some reason. and they rode bicycles, these early experimental bicycles on these like dirt roads from um, Missoula, Montana, all the way down to St. Louis, Missouri, and we had a big section about them in that experiment, but it didn't fit the narrative of our film and where we were taking it. And it's something that I that I hate. And, you know, when you're making a film, a lot of stuff that like you
Yeah.
love gets cut on,
Stays on the, yeah.
left on the cutting room floor, and that was one of the stories that hurt that we didn't get to, because we had some amazing graphics and like it was on like it was done. So hopefully PBS will have those as extras on their websites. They
Oh,
have- yeah,
It made national newspapers.
yeah. Yeah, we also had some stuff about the current Buffalo Soldiers MC, just to kind of tie those two, you know, stories together. But that also didn't make it neither.
so something that was written in the chat that I thought was interesting. Douglas said that soldiers complain when they're happy. So
Complain about everything.
yeah. So
Hey,
if they're
so
complaining, they're good.
can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Jerry.
This is Jerry. How you doing?
Good
How
about yourself.
Good, 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 good.
Your
I saw
video
you got-
sideways.
Oh, is it? I don't know how to do this. It's supposed to be this way, or
That's fine. That's just fine.
Hey, Drew,
We-
Jerry is the president of our association.
I spoke with Jerry briefly. How's it going, Jerry?
Hey,
yeah.
I missed it.
I usually don't. I usually don't do the video because that's always wrong.
I
At
think
least
we're
I got
used
the
to
sound. At least I have the sound working.
That's the most important thing.
I think we're used to it these days. We just kind of go with it, but I thought I should point it out for some reason.
Okay. Two things. One thing, Wendy, answer your question. You asked them about the Buffalo Soldiers, about if they have to be lineage of the Buffalo
lineage, yeah.
Soldiers. I know the group here in San Antonio, you don't have to be. You just,
Okay.
you know, you don't have to be a lineage. You can join. The question I have is, it's been a while since I watched the film. I watched it when it first came out, and I haven't watched it since. But did you find out what was the relationship between the Buffalo Soldiers and the Scouts here in the Southwest? What kind of relationship do they have with each other? Did you find anything?
It's interesting, and thank you for bringing that up, Jared. So my next film focuses on that relationship and more
Okay.
specifically on the Native Scouts and the Black Seminole Negro Scouts, and kind of the relationship, almost even a part two of what Buffalo Soldiers was, with stepping a different lens, right, through the Native American lens to make Native American eye. Right, and the Black Seminole Scouts are a big part of that, because that's African American history, and that's one way that I can tell this overarching story is through that point of view. So I don't know yet, and I'm learning more. We are currently in development of that project right now, but I think they were all on separate regiments from what I was understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I used to think that they had a scout like assigned to each regiment, and
Yeah,
so,
I think so too.
as more of that we've learned, right? They were different regiments.
Yeah, the Indian Scout group, of course, each company was of a different nation, and they were assigned to posts rather than to units.
Mhm.
So like the Black Seminole Scouts were at Brackettville forever, almost. And dependent units would move in and out, other units would move in and out, but they were always there because that was an area that they knew. And that was the whole point of having scouts. Local people who could find their way in the area. We were I do Civil War, and I'm working on a project, the forgotten people of the Civil War. People at the time, of course, most people are forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even some people who, if you go back and look carefully, you find people mentioned. Well, eventually they get forgotten too, because they're just not that famous, like, and one of the people, Joe Ramo, amazingly difficult man to track down. He wasn't apparently in the U.S. colored troops. He was certainly a Seminole scout. The trouble is, his name is spelled so many different ways, it's impossible to track him down. I think I found about a half a dozen different ways that Ramo could be spelled. And if you go and look in for example, the Civil War Soldiers and Sailors database, there are dozens and dozens of people who share one of those names. So very difficult. Many people, even people who are considered educated, may not have had more than a 6th or 7th grade education, and many people, enormous percentage of people, were illiterate. So their name could be spelled anyway, and no one would notice but we can't track them down.
All right.
That's so true.
Any other questions? Do we have any other over here?
I think one interesting thing, if you've read Teddy Roosevelt's book about Cuba, The Rough Riders, I forget who it was that said it should be titled Alone in Cuba, but if you actually read it, he's a lot less self-centered. Just people just assume that, and his account of the fighting at Santiago, San Juan Hill, and El Caney is very interesting. He's giving an enormous amount of credit to the black troops. He talks about how, after they finished attacking up one side of San Juan Hill, everybody is just passing canteens around and not even noticing who the guy next to him was drinking, had drink, black regulars, white regulars, volunteers, just, exhausted, which I think is an interesting observation. His record, of course, is very mixed in race matters. But there he's apparently being very, very open about it.
Awesome.
So, Dru, where do you come down on the idea of where they got the name Buffalo Soldiers? Do you think it was the tufts from the buffalo's hair, or was it because they actually wore the buffalo hide as a jacket?
I think in the film we just kind of listed all the different ways that they possibly had gotten their names, kind of the myth behind it. I guess I don't know. I never really had an opinion on it. I just kind of wrote.
Yeah, just kind of stated the facts. Yeah.
The facts of I mean, I think in that the first mention of it in any literal term was in a book, Letters to Soldiers book, as we mentioned in the film, where a lady, kind of described them, how she heard that they got their name. So, I guess I never really had a real opinion on it. I thought it was cool. I thought all the little myths and was fun. It's kind of why we had fun with it as we were talking about it. So, yeah.
But that's the way to make a topic like this more interesting to people. To talk about the little things, and they're not really very important, but
Right.
they catch your attention.
Right.
you know, if you just wanted to say, you know, African-American soldiers in the army on the frontier, well, you know,
Yeah.
but say Buffalo Soldiers, it catches your attention.
Yeah, I stayed objective to any of it, I guess, as much as I could.
And also the music. I think the music throughout the documentary was really cool. You had mentioned earlier that you didn't like some song. What song was it? Was it the Bob Marley song, Buffalo Soldier?
Yeah, possibly because I feel like that was the only reference to Buffalo Soldier that anybody knew, and it cost us, you know, it would cost us $20,000 to $30,000 to license. So I just
Wow.
made myself hate it, so I didn't want
So you didn't.
to. But
That's a good strategy.
the Persuasions made an amazing song. Uh, we did license theirs. We licensed Quincy Jones' Buffalo Soldiers Soul Saga song. And we had an original piece made by a group out of Seattle called Black Stacks. So we
Wow.
should probably make a soundtrack a little.
Yeah, the music was so good throughout that. Yeah, I think the soundtrack would be amazing.
Yeah, music, right, is close to me. I wanted to attract a younger, diverse audience. So playing with the sound, um, I thought it was first and foremost.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Does anyone else have any other?
Jamming in class, like, yes,
You know,
in their head.
it just occurred to me when we're talking about this. In the Civil War, some of the USCT regiments had their own song. You know, and I wonder if you know, guys sitting around on Saturday night, you know, with nothing to do, make up a song, or they
Oh,
make
yeah.
words to a tune. You know, it'd be hard to find out where they are though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. I mean, some of the most amazing pieces of music I've ever heard are cadences, you know? It's amazing. And you know, I've never been in the military, but just hearing it, you understand how it does bring everybody together and makes everyone get on one accord, you know?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine that there are probably quite a few ways to express themselves in cadences and song to get through.
Yeah.
When you were doing research, did you go to the church press, the church papers and whatnot? Because during the Civil War, some of the USCT would write home to their church, you know, to their families, and the letters would be printed in the church newspaper.
Oh, wow.
And several people researching the USCT found some of these papers to be, you know, really, because it was difficult to find letters. People don't save letters necessarily.
Right.
And this
Right.
was a place to find the letters from people.
No, I'm not sure. Dr. New is it?
No fee.
No fee.
I'm not sure if we did any church research papers. We did have an amazing research team, right? And so I don't know where they all got it, but they got a lot of stuff from different museums and Library of Congress, as well as some people's personal collections, like Anthony Powell's personal collection. So that's kind of where we got a lot of our archival newspaper and images of the soldiers.
You pardon me for a moment. I'm looking for something. It's a book recently published about the Buffalo Soldiers. I sent a copy to Alan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's about soldiering in a Buffalo Soldier unit. And let me see if I can
Wow.
find the reference. You know, it doesn't talk much about what they did, but it talks about organization, recruiting, percentage of people from different, you know, what states these guys came from.
Mhm. You know, something that I think was interesting was that several of the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts did rejoin the military after the group was disbanded
Yes.
and became Buffalo Soldiers. You know, they weren't necessarily considered Buffalo Soldiers as Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, but we do have several that did rejoin us and became Buffalo Soldiers. So I've always thought that that was interesting. This idea of continued service, even though they had just, decimated or kind of, disbanded the group that you were a part of.
After a time, that's kind of all you know, right? I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the only guarantee that
get
they
money,
had.
right?
Yeah. And something I've also always wondered, because I know that when a lot of the men reached retirement, they had the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, they had a hard time getting their pension. Did you find any information about whether or not that was also true for Buffalo Soldiers? Were
Yeah,
they paid?
Kathy Williams didn't, right? She didn't get her pension.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Moses Williams, died broken alone, and right, and Charles Young died over in Liberia,
Yeah.
right, and they
So the
all,
three people that were chronicled kind of had tragic.
yeah,
Yeah.
That,
where
that,
they
that
kind
was
of died alone.
yeah, that was pretty common for almost any veteran Civil War, white or black. Congress
Uh,
was very reluctant to give pensions. And, guys would maybe take 5, 10 years to get an $8 pension or something.
wow.
The book is More Work Than Glory.
Hmm.
All right, that's the title. And it's Buffalo Soldiers in the, whoops, well, that was smart of me. Buffalo Soldiers in the United States Army, 1865, 1916. The author is a guy named Langelier, Langellier. There, there's a big piece on the bicycle march, chaplains, the fact that they spent most of their time doing construction, but and he had also addresses like some of the myths, like complaints about poor horses or shoddy equipment. That was like everybody in the army complained about poor horses and shoddy equipment because that was what you're supposed to do. And then he talks about what happened to some of these guys afterwards, in retirement, which I thought was interesting. But I sent a copy to Alan.
Mhm. Yeah. So Alan is Alan Mack, and he is a reenactor. He's an amazing. What time periods does he specialize in? It seems like.
Well, I think he does mostly Civil War and post-Civil War through World War One, but every once in a while you spot him doing World War Two.
Yeah.
Um, but he does really well. But he looked at the book and he said this was really good because it dealt with a lot of stuff that you would want to know as a reenactor,
Exactly. Yeah.
but wasn't necessarily, how should I put it? Wasn't necessarily going to turn up in normal history books because they're talking about soldiering and fighting and whatnot,
Yeah. Sort of the minutia, which
Yeah,
you want to know to be an authentic,
yeah,
reenactor.
yeah.
Hey, Easy, did you have a question? How are you doing, first of all?
Oh no, good evening, everyone. No, it's my sister. I don't have any question. I'm just listening and I jumped in a little late. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. And Easy is, you're with the Buffalo Soldiers in San Antonio, right? Bear County.
Yes, me along with Mr. Doug up in the upper left-hand corner. We're members of the Bear County Buffalo Soldiers Association here, group of living historians that been around in San Antonio since 1999. So it's always a pleasure to listen in and team up with our brothers and sisters out there in Brackerville, Seminole Negro Indian Scouts and their descendants, and anyone else who is pursuing the knowledge and spreading the love about the history of the Buffalo Soldiers. So we thank you for the invite, Sister Willow, and everyone else. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. And will y'all be participating in Fort Clark Days?
Yes, ma'am, as always.
Okay,
And
awesome, awesome.
yes, ma'am.
Nice to meet you, Easy.
You as well, sir, and everyone else in the audience.
One the officers, some of them become very impressive. It's like they do better at reaching high rank than officers in the white regiments.
Mhm.
Possibly because the experience of commanding black troops was different, and but you get oh gosh, what was his name? The guy who commanded in Cuba. I think he commanded the 10th Cavalry for quite a while.
Hatch or Grierson,
Who?
Colonel Hatch or Colonel Grierson from the 9th and 10th
No,
Cavalry.
Grierson was famous in the Civil War, but he rose to general's rank in the army after the war. Yes, but he commanded one of the regiments. He's the guy that the movie Horse Soldiers is about, or is supposed to be about anyway. But also, it's funny, I can't think of his name. And by 1898, he was a big fat guy. So everybody made fun of him, but there was no fat up here, and people missed that part. But several of the other officers who came out of the Buffalo Soldiers were a chain, well, obviously Pershing, who was there,
Yeah.
who had a very mixed, once he got in charge of the army, he had a different attitude than earlier. And there's a recent book about the chaplains. There were like a half a dozen chaplains during the period. One of them became fairly famous, Ainsworth. He was a Civil War veteran and became a chaplain, Buffalo Soldiers. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, which at the time was the highest rank any black person had gained. Then he moved to California and founded a town. Interesting character.
What period would that have been if he founded a town in California? It would have been 1800s or
1890s or so. The town I think no longer exists, but it's now it's like a historical marker place, nobody lived in California in those days.
yeah, wow.
Mr. Dopey, one of the most, at least we have our chaplain in our association, but one of the most intriguing things about the chaplains was that not only did they provide spiritual health for those, at least for the Buffalo Soldiers, but they also taught many of them how to read and write because they were former slaves. They didn't know how to read and write.
Wow.
Yes.
For the first time in the United States Army, at least to my knowledge, to our knowledge, it was when the chaplains actually left the garrison. They traveled with the Buffalo Soldiers. They were not stationed at their posts. So they went along with them out to the frontier to also provide that academic and religious education to those troops as well. So that was another important point that we found out about the Buffalo Soldiers as well. The chaplains, the role they played in the United States Army.
And who would the chaplains have been? Would the chaplains mostly have been Black as well, or were they?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
In fact, they were the only Black officers in the Army until you began to get the couple of guys from West Point, many of whom just didn't succeed for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm trying to think.
Mostly racism is the reason why.
Racism, some of it's hard to tell. Like, oh gosh, what's guy who was expelled from the West Point graduate?
Lieutenant Flipper.
Flipper, yeah. I've read a lot of the papers. One of the things that all junior officers in the Army had a problem with was paperwork. They got out of West Point and they learned everything, except when you get to the Army, there's all this paperwork and bookkeeping, and that was usually dumped on the most junior officer in a unit. And so they frequently had problems with paperwork, and they'd also be responsible for keeping the books. And it was not unusual for there to be problems because they'd never been trained to do this. And I think Flipper officially was because there were some problems in the books. But that,
Financial.
but that happened to a lot of junior officers, and was generally overlooked. They just help them out. In Flipper's case, it was useful to get rid of him. The what you call it book, the More Work Than Glory, has some interesting stuff about situations where a black soldier was in charge and had to be deferred to by white troops. Like one example was a post which was primarily Buffalo soldiers present. So the post quartermaster was a black man, black sergeant and so that meant that white troops passing through had to deal with him as the post quartermaster. And he has some interesting, discussions about how that sort of worked out. And I saw something, oh God. I did a little book on the Spanish-American War and got into some papers. On duty in the regular army, it was sometimes the case where black soldiers would be provost marshal guard, and the white troops would have to defer to them. So you can imagine the tension that it, might have developed at times.
Right.
Can't remember the reference. I didn't have to. The book. I did the book about 25 years ago, so I don't.
Oh, you're forgiven for not remembering every detail then. Dru, what do you think the idea of, we understand, the racial tensions, like Dr. Nofi was just speaking about. Do you think that serving in the military was one of the only ways that Black men and overall Black people could prove their solidarity to this idea that we call America? Was there any other way that they could have proven that they bought into this idea that they're citizens of this country as well by being willing to shed blood for it? Was there any other thing that they could have done other than, take up arms?
I would say, yeah, absolutely. There was other things that they could have done other than take up arms, but I haven't served in the military, so I don't, I couldn't say what that does for a person. But like I said before, it was an opportunity for, the average, African American man coming from the South to kind of get out of that cycle of poverty, share workers. But during the same time, Reconstruction was happening. So right, there was opportunities all over the place right after the Civil War.
Yeah.
I would say for the more average man in the South, this was a great opportunity for them.
Yeah, because I would think, right after slavery, a lot of people went into sharecropping, which was, another form of slavery.
Yeah, but they also went into politics, right? There was, right, they also went into owning businesses. Racism burned down their businesses, right?
Yeah.
Took out these striving Black communities. Racism even killed soldiers that were fighting for the country.
Exactly.
So, I guess that's a mixed question for me to, because, the whole time as I'm, making this, patriot film, that's just what it grew to be, right? I have my own, right? We're making this during 2020, right? During all the,
Yeah.
the uprising of 2020 and right, and all the things that were going on in our nation. So yeah, I was torn like the whole time.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Was that a driving force to
Was
get this done? All the upheaval of 2020 into 2021, was that a driving force to complete this film to show?
I think the story started out, or my motivation and mission started out, is to tell a more, as other BIPOC filmmakers, is to give us more of our history other than, slavery, uh,
Mhm.
civil rights, and, kind of living in the ghetto. And then now we're rappers and shit.
Yeah,
We wanted to give more of this African American history, more of the context, more of the layers of our story, right? And I think every day we're continuing to be able to pull out more of those layers to know that there is more involved in our history than that.
exactly, exactly. I love that this all started because your little girl asked a question.
Yeah.
So, has she and her older sister watched the film, and what did they think?
I want to lie to you and say, yeah, she watched it. She loves it. She goes and tell her friends to watch it. She has watched it. I think
Mhm.
make like a TikTok version for her to really consume it the way that I would break it all out in TikTok 30
30
seconds,
seconds.
clips, singing and dancing, and she might take it in. But and honestly, the movie was meant to have legs. So if you don't check it out now, you know what I mean. It's there for resource to check out later, right?
Exactly.
Or to expand upon this story. It's just a jumping off point, right? We couldn't cover everything within this hour. The story's too broad, but this is a jumping off point to go and learn some more. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you gave people enough to like whet their appetite, and now you get to go out and find out more on your own. So, I think that's sort of the chef's kiss of your documentary, is that it is going to hopefully lead people to want to do more research. And I feel like, even though will be doing the Indian Scouts project, maybe you'll revisit this at some point. But, there's so much there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there. And I hear all the time that I missed
I
so
can
much.
imagine a lot of people.
And I know I did, right? And I couldn't go over everything, and I really wish I could have
You know,
had the time and the budget.
Yeah,
these things that constantly turn up on the internet and television, what history forgot and so on, and why isn't this taught in school? Well, history is like this big, and we can't tell even this much, because
yeah,
there's just so much. And with modern technology, we could help people get to that bigger, picture. A friend of mine and I some years ago had designed a computer game on the 100 Years' War.
oh well.
And so we put together a mountain of notes about the 100 Years' War, and then linked everything together. So it's just this little couple of pages that say the 100 Years' War was this shit. But then almost every word had a link. The King of England claims on the throne of France, and you could click on that, and there'd be a little explanation of that, and somebody's name turns up, and you can go in there, and we could do that now, but school systems still want to persist with old-fashioned textbooks and whatnot, and the publishers are happy about that, instead of trying to use this new technology where, like imagine a project in American history, and you have a short unit on the frontier, just this happens, but meanwhile you got buttons, and one of them is Buffalo Soldiers, and then you can go into this huge well of information, and just go digger and deeper and deeper and deeper. You have a little skeleton, and then it has these connections to more information.
You know what? To add on to that, those points both of your points are excellent points because our association has been around since 1999. I've only been a member for 4 years. And I
Oh,
will
wow.
tell you, as much as we study and learn, I forget, I go down rabbit holes, and we feed off of each other to remind and to educate the community. Case in point, like both of you gentlemen just said, we are the spark. Hopefully, people will be interested enough to do their own independent research because we can't retain it all. You
Yeah.
know, if you're not consistently doing it all the time, you just can't retain all that knowledge and information because it's just too much. It's like a universe. You know, we're just talking about one piece. We're talking about the Buffalo Soldier, the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. When you talk about, let's say, American history and bring
Mhm.
everybody into the fold, you just hope that you provide that spark of inspiration to those who are listening to go and do their own independent research and carry that knowledge forth. But I love those 2 points you just brought up because we experience it all the time and we just feed off of each other. There have been times I've done lectures and I forgot to tell people how they got the name Buffalo Soldiers. I'm so involved and I'm going down one path. And like, oh, by the way, did I tell you how they got that name? You know? Oh, well, no, those are great points you gentlemen just brought up.
I just have one thing to add, everyone. The Buffalo Soldiers and they were black cowboys, and they taught people how to ride, they taught people how to raise cattle, they taught people how to survive off of the land, and also they produced their own meat by cows and horses, so they sustained. And that's the big part about the Buffalo Soldiers is the black cowboy is still alive and they're still going.
Mr. Golden, that's a great point. One of our founding members, President Emeritus Billy Gordon, he depicts the Black Cowboy experience. Sometimes we go down to the Briscoe Museum here in San Antonio, Texas. A couple of years ago, they unveiled the first and only painting by a gentleman from California of Black cowboys that's in that museum, the first one ever in that museum. And he depicts it and tells a story about the Black cowboy experience. And that's another one. There you go. You know, that's another
Yeah.
story because there was a movie on a few years ago. God forgive me, I can't remember, but it's about black cowboys. They weren't really cowboys, but they were in Philadelphia. I think Idris Elba played in it, and he told a little bit about that story. But they weren't cowboys per se. They had horses that drove the carts through the city of Philadelphia. I just don't recall it, but you're right. That's a whole nother story too that we don't know about. You know, great point.
I think that movie was called Concrete Cowboy, and
Yes,
I
sir.
thought I heard you say the Brisket Museum in San Antonio, and I was like, yo,
Briscoe.
I'm coming.
Briscoe.
Y'all got a Brisket Museum down there? Sign me.
Briscoe.
No, I heard it. I
Oh, gotta have some
me
comedy in there.
That's a sensitive topic, brisket.
It is very
That's being
sensitive, but
sensitive.
you could come and eat some brisket. You could go to the Briscoe Museum and eat some brisket, though.
Yep.
But you got to come to New York and try some pastrami, which is Jewish brisket.
Hey, watch out. I'm
I would love
now.
to.
Watch out
Very
there now.
good.
I would love that. Now y'all talking my language. Well, thank you so much for having me. Please, if you have
Yes.
any questions, I would love to answer them. Otherwise, I got to grab some dinner. I know it's late where y'all at. It's got to be like 9 o'clock, ain't it?
It's 9 o'clock now on the East Coast, 8
Ooh.
o'clock Central Time. Are there any other questions for Mr. Dru Holley?
Sister Wendy, you did record this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm at a dial back, and I'm so sorry I came in late.
No, you're fine.
I was
It's a
watching.
very casual conversation, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make this one easy.
Those are the best
And
ones. You know,
yeah, looking forward to seeing y'all in March.
you know we'll be there in
Yes.
September.
I'm
And-
hoping to be there in September,
Oh, awesome. Good.
but not.
Bring some pastrami.
No, you can't. It won't last because I'm going to eat it on the way. I mean, I just have to walk 2 blocks and get some really good, old-fashioned pastrami, but not on Friday and Saturday, of course.
Yeah. But I just want to recognize Dr. Steve Holmes. He's wearing that Houston Texans jacket there. Want to thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir. As long as it isn't a Dallas Cowboys star, you're my friend.
Oh, goodness. I think I'm a Houston Texans fan now.
My goddaughter,
Y'all got too many teams out there.
my
Next year will be
goddaughter,
the Cowboys' year.
my goddaughter's father is from Washington D.C. area, but her mother's people come from Texas. And so there is this thing between his mom and his dad about which football team to root for. Very serious. I mean, like,
I can imagine it can get very serious. So,
you know,
any other questions? I also want to say hi to Miss Lavinia Raspberry. She joined a little late, but thank you for coming on. And Michael Nunley, thank you also.
Yes.
Thank you all for
You're
having me.
welcome. I'm sorry I missed it, but my Bible study is at the same time today.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's been recorded, so we'll definitely make sure you get a recording. Right. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to say thank you, Dru, for coming on this evening. Yeah, more importantly, thank you so much for your hard work and dedication that you poured into that beautiful documentary. So, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend that you take the time to go and watch it. It just shows how passionate you are about this subject. And, thank you for making sure that our Black history is being told in a way that people can access.
Wendy, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you're doing, putting these things together, and your heart, you guys' dedication into our history. Yeah, please keep it up.
Yeah, we will. And thank you. Yeah, it's because people like you are willing to come on that these are happening. So thank you.
Thank you.
all right, have a
All
good
right,
evening.
everyone. Y'all take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, y'all.